Chapter 15. Water pushed upwards, and the shock wave caused the air to vibrate with so much force that Zack was thrown from the blast, and his ears muffled as he hit the floor with a resounding thud. He lay there completely drenched from the spray of water thrown everywhere from the explosion. After making a mental check of himself, Zack jumped into the car, still dazed. His only thought was to head to town and warn everyone what had just happened. His ears still ringing from the explosion, Zack started the car and put it into drive, then sped down the road towards the town. The speedo hit 30, 60, then 100, and the engine growled as the scenery blurred either side of him. The roof of the car became unclipped, ripped off with the wind, and flew off into the road behind him. As he reached the town, his hearing had almost returned to normal, and he braked with a resounding screech. In the supermarket car park, Zack saw the strangest thing. His mother was just sitting in her car, staring at the dam. It was as if she was just waiting for it to explode. He got out, walked to her car, and knocked on the window. She didn't even flinch, just sitting there staring at the dam. Looking through the car window, various clues told a different story. The car keys were in the ignition. Her knuckles were white as she gripped the steering wheel, and she didn't move a muscle, her eyes peeled to the window. He opened the door and checked her pulse. It was faint, but she had one. Putting his ear up to her mouth, he could feel her breath against his face. "You've got to wake up!" he shouted. There was no response. Above his head, Zack heard a helicopter flying into the town, and he spotted the Channel 14 News Network logo as it hovered close to the fire station. There was another bang, and the ground shook. He looked up and saw a crack in the dam. Grabbing the seat belt, he unclipped it, and it snapped upwards, almost catching him in the face as it recoiled into the holder. Someone wanted to make this look like an accident if she was ever found, when the dam released its full force. But who? The woman? Who was she? Questions flew around his head. More helicopters flew over. 3, 4, no, 5 choppers in all. They hovered above the other end of the parking lot, and he watched as soldiers expertly slid down the ropes onto the tarmac of the car park. A man wearing camouflaged gear ran towards the car. "You've got to get out of here," said the soldier. "I can't move her," replied Zack. "Ma'am, we've got to go. I need you to move over to the passenger seat." To Zack's surprise, Rebecca let go of the steering wheel and got into the opposite side of the vehicle. "Get in. We've got another Huey coming in, and we need to make space for it," said the soldier to Zack. Zack saw some buses coming down the road, heading towards the fire station. With Zack in the back of the car and his mum slumped in the passenger seat, the soldier twisted the keys in the ignition and drove the car out of the supermarket car park towards the fire station and the waiting coaches. "Ma'am, you need to get out of the car and onto that bus. I will take you to safety," said the soldier, pointing to where the buses were stopping. "Sir, you need to get on that bus too." The soldier spoke to the driver while Zack and another passenger helped his mother onto the bus. After she was sitting in the back seat, Zack got up and told the driver he needed to get off. "Nope, no one's getting off, buddy," said the driver in a determined tone. "But I need to go," said Zack, crossing his legs. "Okay, but I am leaving in 2 minutes," replied the driver. Zack got off, and the driver stuck a thumbs up at the soldier who was guiding people on. He sauntered down the side of the bus towards the other side, and amidst all the confusion, Zack sneaked away from the bus, towards his home street, hoping that his father would be there. Above him was another helicopter, blades blowing dust and leaves everywhere, and a squeal from a speaker, then an announcement. "This is the Army. You are being evacuated. Please proceed to the coaches in Burn Street, outside the fire station. This is not a drill." As people heard the announcement, they emerged from their houses. It repeated through the speaker, and some soldiers started running down the street, knocking on doors. "You need to get to the bus," said one soldier. "This is an evacuation. Grab your medications, then proceed to the bus," said another. People ran towards the bus, and an enormous crowd headed towards Zack. He waded through the oncoming sea of people as fast as possible, as people were pushing and shoving against him to flee to safety. The crowd of people thinned as they went one direction, and he went the other, and Zack arrived at his old house. "Dad?" he called out. "Mike, are you here?" There was silence. He looked around and remembered that his dad had gone to his uncle's house on the other side of the lake. "That blast must have caused more damage than I realized," he said to himself, suspecting he might have a concussion. Wondering how he could get there, he remembered his father's bike in the garage. Rummaging around, he found his father's bicycle and some old paintings that his mother and father had never gotten round to putting up, then cycled down the street. The street was almost empty now, with only a couple of soldiers trying to entice people to leave their homes, and Zack could hear gunshots in the distance, with lots of shouting. Another rumble from the dam, and the news crew in the helicopter moved closer to take in more footage of what was going on. Zack looked up. The line was more like a large crack now, and the water was spewing out, with large chunks of debris and brick being flung by the force of the water. This was going to go, and there was no stopping it. There was another loud bang. This time it was coming from the area where Zack had been with the coaches, and he spotted a soldier with his rifle in the air, trying to break up a riot in the crowd. The noise of the crowd quietened, and Zack looked overhead as 3 of the helicopters headed off back to the army base. He looked back at the crowd and watched as a woman was arrested, and then the crowd of people separated into lines, and people were escorted onto the buses. The first bus started on the journey out of the town, and Zack watched as it headed towards Appleton Hill. Zack continued cycling through the street, pedalling as hard as he could towards the dam. More water and bricks gushed out and exploded from the wall, and Zack knew he was running out of time. He pedalled harder, as hard as he could to get up the road, and by now water was dribbling down the road in small streams. He got off the bike and ran uphill towards the turn-off to the guard's booth. People in the town were now dropping their belongings, rushing and running. They pushed and ran towards the coaches and their chance of survival. This was no longer an organized crowd of evacuees, but more like a crazed mob, pushing as far and as hard as they could. More shots rang out, this time from the soldiers down in the town. An army man shouted. He raised his weapon and aimed at the mob, and shouted some more, waving his rifle to direct people into the coach. The crowds piled onto the coaches as fast as they could. The doors closed on the second coach, and it soon started its journey uphill towards the police roadblock. Another coach followed behind it. Rebecca was glad to be on coach number 2, happy that they were on their way. She shifted her gaze to the dam and watched in horror as water spewed out and smashed into the houses below. The third and fourth coaches filled quickly. A man started chucking wads of cash into the air, and as people's greed got the better of them, he climbed onto the bus as the doors were closed, and the 5th coach was on its way towards Appleton Hill. By the time he had reached the guard's booth, the guard had gone. and the ground shook as large chunks of the wall finally gave way and were spat outwards by the force of the water to the waiting town below. The water followed. This was no gush. This was a deluge, a tsunami, and in seconds 1,000,000 tons of water left the dam. There was nothing he could do as Zack watched as the level on the side just dropped. Turning round, he saw the torrent of water throwing itself into the town. Zack remembered what was going to happen. He'd seen this all before as he watched it on the TV at school. He knew some coaches wouldn't make it, and that the one his mother was on barely got to the top of the hill. The helicopters in the air were trying to fly away, and they were being buffeted by the sheer force of the wave. As the water level dropped, so did the air pressure, grabbing an army helicopter and sucking it into the dam. Amidst all the chaos, a beautiful rainbow shone its colours across the town. At the edge of the dam, the ground near Zack gave way, and in seconds he was sucked underneath. Behind him, what was left of the guard's hut bobbed up and down in the mud soup. He struggled to breathe with the pressure against his chest, trying to look for something to grab onto. The next thing he knew, he was being flung at a massive velocity out of the gap and into the town. He saw cars, houses, people, trees, and so much water. It was the best that he could do to stay above the surface, and several times Zack went underneath again, then bobbed back up. In front of him, another tree which he narrowly missed, and an entire row of houses. Then he spotted it, his house, a speck in the distance, becoming bigger and bigger by the second. There was no way he was going to avoid this. His body slammed against the building. The sound of the water covered the sound of the windows smashing, and there was nothing he could do. His head hit the brickwork, and everything went black. Zack's unconscious body, bruised and battered, stayed there for a moment, and as the water subsided, it slid underneath the water.